Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Thinking Marketing Podcast, where we dive deep into marketing with cutting edge marketers. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Salif Sibane. The reason why I'm so excited is that Salif is one of my favorite follows on LinkedIn, which has been shared to me by my colleagues multiple times so you can understand how insightful it is. Salif is specialized in direct response paid social ads. He's the founder of Siba Consulting, which is a boutique direct response paid social ad agency that helps 7, 8, and 9-figure D2C brands profitably scale their paid social efforts. In today's episode, Salif shares his thoughts on how you become successful in your direct response advertising, which kinda is like the core of paid social advertising. So if you want to be successful with paid social growth, you need to understand these principles. It takes us all the way from how you do good research on your target audience to then scaling the accounts and all the things that are happening in between there. Listening to Salif is very insightful and you learn a lot from today's episode. As I mentioned in the beginning, he's also very good at creating content on LinkedIn, Twitter, and similar platforms. And towards the end of the episode, he lays out his thinking on how you build good content and an engaged audience on social media. If you like today's episode, make sure to follow my newsletter on thinkingmarketing.io, follow Salif on LinkedIn and Twitter to keep getting this knowledge that he's sharing with us today, and also follow me on my social medias to get snackable insights from cutting-edge marketers. And without further ado, here's the episode with Salif. What is direct response ads, and which companies should do it, which products, and on which platforms are you running these ads?
I think that honestly, every D2C brand should have a direct response, aspect to their acquisition, because unless you're like a very huge brand that doesn't really need to, rely hardly on acquisition. You have like a lot of equity, like Nike, Adidas, right? Everybody knows them. They can just, people just purchase because of like the brand. You get to that point where you're like maybe at 250 million plus a year, but even then, like you still need to acquire customers. And like if you look at the biggest brands, like True Classic, Pros, these really huge D2C brands that everybody knows, they still rely on direct response as basis, a foundation of their acquisition, which are basically direct response is basically the marketing principles of like what the converts the consumer to take a certain action in terms of like getting a direct purchase, right? So them seeing a piece of ad, like an advertisement, could be on any platform, and getting a direct response from them, where that is like a click, a purchase, a buy, a subscribe, right? A direct response. So that's my definition of the direct response. I think there's like way more definitions, but that's the way we like to look at it. We're getting a direct response from like the consumer, right? The lead.
And you are mainly focusing on paid social, right?
Correct. So we are primarily focused on paid social. So anything that is about Facebook ads, Meta advertising on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok ads, and some Google and YouTube as well. But the beautiful thing is that all these direct response principles, right, that have just been there forever, are very easily applicable to this day. So some of our a lot of the time people nowadays use UGC, right, as being content performance content, and those direct response frameworks are easily applicable to the UGC side of things as well. But back then they were used for like newspaper ads, right? But the thing is that direct response is really based on principles, and those will never change, versus like platform trends, algorithms which always change, right? And that's the beauty about it.
Very cool. And you're talking about principles, frameworks, etc. I know that you're working with very structured processes and you break things down. And one framework that I found that you guys are using is a kind of process from starting to work with a brand and then going all the way to the scaling part. So you have research and hypothesis, briefing and storyboarding, production, creative testing, analysis and iteration, and then scale. And I think what would be really interesting now and very useful for the listeners is to go through all of them one by one and talk about some key things to think about at each stage. So if we start with the research and hypothesis, how do you get started with doing good research, defining hypothesis, and what is a good hypothesis?
Yeah, and this is great that you mentioned this point, because a lot of the time, marketers, brands, they might praise like the visuals, right? They might put the visuals, the actor on a pedestal, but we've seen that, really to drive a certain level of scale with performance creative, you need to put a lot of energy and focus in the research part, really the messaging behind the ad versus just the visual, right? And then there's this narrative being thrown out there of ads that, make TikToks, do not make ads, right? Ads that don't look like ads. And I agree to that to a certain point, in the sense of, obviously, like, and this is another, funny enough, that's another direct response principle as well, like camouflaging, right? Making sure that your ads blending well with the platform, that they really look like they're not really selling too much. So there's definitely an element of, like, you putting visuals and, like, on a pedestal as well. But what really, at least what worked for us in terms of really driving growth, rapid growth for brands, is putting more emphasis on the research part, really understanding the consumers, like the audience at a deep level, and understanding how we should, the levers we should put in order to make them convert. So yeah, definitely the first point that we go through when we start working with a new brand is the research phase, which typically takes us in around like 7 to 10 days, in which we really do a deep dive on the audience, the product, the offer that we're pushing, the brand, the competition, the previous data, and the ad account, to really come up with the marketing angles, right? This is a very extensive research, which is done by our creative strategist. So they will, like, create a quote bank of, which is basically like categorizing all the reviews that we have for that specific offer we're pushing, to see how, what's the main kind of like angles that we can create out of those. So let's say that we're creating a quote bank for weight loss supplement for women, right? So, there might be a lot of different reasons why people purchase that product. So you want to basically categorize them and see, okay, how can we include these specific words, or like even turn these into angles? So we look at the reviews, we look at the competition as well. We look at, okay, what's the angles that the competition is pushing, right? So if we see that there's like 5 competitors out there, and, we see a recurring angle within the ads, maybe they're all pushing this, I don't know, like, yeah, let's say weight loss angle. You're like, okay, this is definitely a winner that we can replicate as well for our clients, maybe tweak it in a different way. See if we can, like, obviously not take that their winning concept, their winning angle, but add a twist to it, which makes it unique to our offer, our client, our brand, right? So yeah, we go through the research, looking at the competition, looking at the previous data, which is also very important, looking at what has been tested already for the client, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and then coming up with the angles. And then out of the angles, creating the unique concepts. And then from then all the essays, variations, unique concepts, and, iterations, stuff like that.
Do you create different angles for different customer personas? Are you also working personas, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we definitely segment the audience as well, and like I look at what's their stage of awareness, right? So there's like, problem aware, solution aware, really categorizing their level of awareness, and seeing, obviously, like, if they are like an older audience. And this is also something that, the brand is funny enough, most of the time our clients come to us and they're like, yeah, our target audience historically is 25 women, women from 25 to 35, right? And that's because they just build this customer avatar when they started the brand. They stuck with that. But upon analyzing at a deeper level, sometimes we see that Facebook is actually spending towards like a slightly older audience, like a different audience than they thought, right? And that's why really diving deep into like the previous data is important, and going through this research phase, so we can really unlock new audiences, right? Maybe we see, okay, we can target an older audience, we can create like a specific angle, which breaks into this audience which was never being tapped to, and thus that's what drives like a lot of profitability for brands. Not just doing the same things over and over, but really tapping into these new angles that have more opportunity, and not a lot of advertisers are like really tapping into.
And so those angles are kind of hypotheses that you then will build your creatives on, I assume. And how could a hypothesis sound like? Like, how do you define it? Like, is it like one line?
The way we define the hypothesis is, first, what's the audience, right? So defining the age range. So, obviously first the gender, so either women, males, female males, or like both. Defining the age range, defining what's their kind of like their main struggles, or like the benefits they're looking for. And then looking at like the ad type that we're going to focus on. So it could be UGC, an UGC ad, like static, mashup style creative, right? So defining the ad type, the audience, including, obviously the demographics and some of the psychographics. And then also defining like the platform, right, that we want to like push it on. So these are, obviously there's more components that go into it, but this is really kind of like how we define an hypothesis. And this gives you like the starting point, the baseline to then develop, in the case you're doing UGC, developing the script, or, just like start to develop the ad creative for that hypothesis.
Okay, you have done your research, you have your hypothesis, then you move to the next step, which is the briefing and storyboarding. So what happens at this step?
So this is basically when, and at least this is how we operate. The hypothesis is carried out by our creative strategist, which then after builds the angle and everything is approved obviously by our client, assigns our script writers to develop the script, right? The first of script and then the storyboard for our production team. So the second step is, as you mentioned, developing the full script. So based on this hypothesis, our creative strategist will brief our script writer on like, okay, this is like who we are targeting. This is the structure you need to follow for this ad. This is all the information that we've gathered, right? Because it's important for them to have access to all the information about the competition, about all the reviews, right? Other like references they can use. And then they just develop the script, which gets approved by our team, obviously internally and also by the client. If there's any feedback, obviously from the client, they let us know. And then we add to it the visuals and turn that into a storyboard, right? So the step goes as follows. We finalize the script, that gets reviewed, and then we add the, visual guidelines, which makes, for to then like move it into production and get it like produced by our creators or designers, right?
And when writing these scripts, are the script writers like freestyling, or are they using some tested like structures that they are like just plugging into?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously at this point we have frameworks that have worked for us for multiple clients. We have successful frameworks that scale, right? So we tend to, if we see that our frameworks works well for like a specific offer that we may have already tested, it was like in a similar vertical, we might implement that because we know it's proven. So no, they don't freestyle. We still provide them a structure. We are very specific. So we tell them like, and obviously this is obviously not super rigid because we still want them to put their own creativity into it. But we will tell them, for example, okay, for this, you need to do X amount of alternative hooks. You want to start the ad with like an outcome first, or you start with a problem, then outcome, then solution. So kind of give them the framework. And yeah, to answer your question, we do have, successful frameworks. But this is, again, based on like what we see in the research. So if we see, again, for example, analyzing the previous creators that are being tested from the client, we see that there's like a winning creative with a specific winning framework. We might want to replicate that. So we see, okay, this creative is working, and based obviously on also certain metrics, we see, okay, the hook rate and the hook rate is strong because, within the first X amount of seconds, the product has been introduced. So the framework is, introduce the product and then get it to the pain point after X amount of seconds. We might want to do that. So we might use that framework and just, give it to our script writers, and then they will add, obviously, like include the script into it and add different visuals, like different things, right? The framework will be kind of reused, but that's just an example,
Are there any parts of the script that always should be there for a successful direct response ad?
I can give you a basic kind of like outline of like what I would do. So doesn't matter the niche. This is like the structure that you can kind of follow, for virtually any offer, any product. So you first, you start, you present the problem, you agitate the problem, you present the solution, you explain how the solution works, either solution or mechanism. Okay, so why does it work? Who has it worked for? So you add social proof, all these direct response principles, like add social proof, build authority, and then you just get to the call to action. But it's important to highlight the problem first without just having like throwing at them benefits of like, okay, buy my product because it's great, right? Mm-hmm. No, like you need to address them, you need to meet them where they are. And that's why, again, over prioritizing, visuals or just making your ad feel organic without any sales element or any pain point really highlighted, can limit scalability because you're not going to trick customers into buy your products anymore. Nowadays, people buy because they have a problem and you present a solution to the problem, which makes sense for them. So the best you can present a solution, really showing them, exactly telling them, okay, this is your pain point, different bureaus, building a story around it, the better it is. So that's kind of like the framework that I would follow, really making sure that you are doubling down on that pain point.
So a really good direct response ad sounds like it's almost like a service to the customer. You're actually telling them that for this problem that you have, we have the solution.
And I would say like really keeping it simple, but also, this obviously like, and that's the thing about creative and like D2C, our space, like there's so many dynamic like scenarios, right? There's no one strategy that works across everything. Because for example, for an older audience, like a boomer audience or like women over 60, that have wrinkles, they want to get rid of wrinkles. In that case, your script will need to be strong. So that's just what we tested, right? So explaining, okay, this is the problem that I was facing. This is building a story around it, really doubling down the messaging. But then let's say you have your typical Gen Z 18-year-old skincare girl that wants, like juicy skin. In that case, you won't need necessarily to have too much storytelling or like really highlight the problem, because they're more attracted to the visuals, right? So it really depends on like the audience. And again, going back to the research, understanding who you're creating these ads for is very, very important. But as a rule of thumb, having like a good structure, no matter like the offer, is obviously very important for direct response.
So then you have the script, you have the storyboard, everything ready. In the next step, you go into production. What happens next?
So what happens next is, we have the scripts, you have the script ready with a visual guideline. So we break down the script in multiple blocks. So for the hook, we're going to have like a specific scene. So, okay, for the hook, we're going to have a talking head, and then we're going to say this line. We're going to have this line that needs to be said. And this is the visual, the action that the actor needs to do. And then for, first part of the body, so body one is going to be a B-roll scene. You need to say this line, and this is what you need to show, right? We break down this at this level. We then share the full storyboard / script to the creators, the production team. And all they have to do is just like look at each scene, in sequential order, execute the shot, upload it into a drive, and then we'll move forward to the post-production. So we really take a lot of, we do a lot of heavy lifting for the actor. And basically all they need to do is just like, obviously use their energy, use their acting skills to execute the brief as much as possible, because everything else is provided by us. So they just execute all the scenes, and typically from one brief we get 20 to 25 B-rolls. So we get a lot of footage that we can reuse. So we collect all the footage and then move forward to the post-production and piece everything together and build the variations for the ad and go from there.
And how do you find these actors?
So places that we like to look at first, think to know that for us is important. We also build very good relationship with our content creators, because I think that it doesn't matter like if you're an agency or if you're a brand, but getting a very good talent onto your team, and then retaining that talent is like really the number thing you should be focusing on. So even for us, we would like to build a really good relationship with each of our content creators, and that's why we like to like work with them rolling on multiple projects, multiple clients, obviously depending on their performance. But at this point, we have around like 30 to 40 people that we work with consistently. But in case we need to source new people, we look at places like Backstage, which is a casting platform. You can create a gig. Backstage, you can put all the specifics. Okay, we were looking for an actor that has this, characteristics, that is this gender, this age, in this country, and they just like they have like access to a pool of actors. And we also look on Twitter, where there's more like your typical UGC creator that, in my opinion, has less that doesn't really come from an acting background, versus Backstage is they're more like coming from acting background, which then turn into like an UGC project. But my suggestion would be to really build like a good network of content creators you can work with on a rolling basis, because it really makes your life easier.
Do you do all the post-production, or are the creators also doing like overlays and stuff like that?
So post-production is fully handled by us. When we first started, some of our creators were doing some post-production, but at this point, everything is handled by our video editors, which again post-production does make or break your ad creative. And that's why each component of this process that I just talked about needs to be on point if you really want to do things the right way. If you want to produce ads that really scale and convert, you need to make sure that each component is really good. From the script, from the research, the script, the actor, the footage, the editing, everything needs to be 10 out of 10. The best, highest level possible. I have a really good video editors on our team. They do the entire post-production, which again, but even then they put their own expertise and scale into it as well. So there's some things that we don't tell our video editors to do. They just do it. They just enhance our, add more stuff to the mix. And that's what I think makes our work really good, is because each member of our team has like a lot of ideas that brings to the table, which then really enriches the final product.
Okay, so going forward now, then you have the creative. It's based on all your research. It's very nice. You have a lot of creatives, I guess, and then you go into the testing phase. What happens here?
testing phase, we like to follow a very basic structure for media buy. Just focus on the creative. Just like have a campaign, testing campaign with like one ad set, and each ad set, if you have one concept with all the variations of that concept, you test it out for 3 to 7 days, unless obviously like the CPC or CPC or CPA is way off, and you can turn it off before, but you want to like allow it to give it a good enough chance in the algorithm. And after the test finishes, you look at the performance. So it's a very simple campaign setup that we share with each of our clients, because it's also important that these assets that we produce get tested the right way. We can also create custom metrics, so like looking at the whole rate, hold rate, the conversion rate, and then based out of those, after the test has concluded, we then create like the testing roadmap and create like a report for our clients.
Do you do testing as in A/B tests, or just launching an ad set with 5 creators in it and just let the algorithm pick which one to run the most?
Yeah, correct. We don't do any A/B testing, like testing this against that. It's more so like just like having this, doing a career experiment of testing this new hypothesis, maybe obviously against others. So let's say we might launch 3 different hypotheses at the same time. So one hypothesis is like on one ad set, and then we have, all the variations of the ad versus like other 2 hypotheses, right? So we can kind of see which one works the best and then go from there.
So you're doing one ad set per hypothesis, and within each ad set, there will be variations of how you communicate this hypothesis.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Are you testing different audiences as well, or just going broad and letting the creative do the targeting for you?
So our first variable we test is obviously the creative. So we just typically do broad targeting. We do some audience testing, so maybe testing 1% lookalikes. Well, that's more like on the media buy side. If you really want to like test some things out, we might do that. But majority of the time, it's purely going broad, letting really the creative do the targeting, really like figuring out how we can optimize on the creative side.
You're doing it for a week. Say that you have a new client. You learn which creatives that works the best. Now I guess you're going to scale, but you also keep testing, or how does that work?
So we are always testing new creators at all times. Depending on like what performs best, we might move it into like a scaling campaign. But we're always testing new creatives, right? And that's also, I highly recommend every brand owner watching this to like sit down and like figure out, okay, how much budget do I want to allocate for testing on a given month? Doesn't matter like what happens, because you always need to have like new creators that have been tested to see what works, what doesn't. But obviously, once something works, you immediately start to bump up the spend.
And one more question on the testing there. How do you calculate the budget for each test?
So based out of your forecasted monthly spend, how much of that you want to allocate to testing new creatives? And, it really depends like what stage the brand is at. So if they are in a growth phase, they really want to scale fast. They have a lot of inventory. They just scaled up production. They're ready to like, really scale up. I would suggest to keep the testing budget at 20 to 30%, 25 to even 30, 35% of the entire monthly spend. So if you're spending 100K a month, then 25 to 30K, you want to just allocate it to testing, right? But then if there's some limitations, so maybe, they don't have too much inventory or they have some constraints, you want to keep it at like 10 to 15%. So if you're spending 100K, then keep testing budget to 10 to 15K. And then based out of that, you want to like find what's the budget per experiment, so per hypothesis, right? Typically 5x the CPA or like AUV. So we look at the average of the value. So let's say your AUV is like $100, then 450, $500 is like what do you want to like allocate each hypothesis that you test. And then based out of that, we just divide it with the monthly testing budget, right? So we do, let's say 30K, which is the calculation that's made, divided by 500, and that gives you like a number of like tests you can do that really distribute the spend the best way possible. And that's just testing of like unique hypothesis, unique concepts with like their respective variations, right? So let's say you do that calculation, you get like a number like 25, 30, you can test 30 concepts for that month, and that's the number you should try to hit every single month.
Are you looking at platforms' own data, or where do you look when you analyze?
Typically, we look at soft metrics just in platform. Those are good, right? We can look at like book rate. Those are like super legit. But then once you start to get out of the platform, right? We like to look at, we use triple whale as well to look at performance, like motion, north beam, and also look, compare with like the Facebook res. But looking at the soft metrics, those are like, fully good to go. You can look at those. Those are fully accurate up until like what happens once they click.
Okay, so you have figured out some winners in your creative testing, and now it's time to scale. How do you manage scaling on paid social?
So for scaling, typically just moving like a CBO and then scale it from there. So as soon as you see that it's getting some traction, bumping it up like a 20, 30% and seeing like if it stays within like the KPIs.
Scaling is not about like having, I guess if you're a good media buyer, you learn through time to like get a sense of how you can scale an account depending on like how big it is, etc.
Yeah.
For brands that want to improve their direct response marketing on paid social, what would be your key tips?
Key tips to nail for brands that want to crack the code with direct response: get a creative strategist on your team that their sole purpose is just looking over your creative strategy, understanding what creatives you should do, at what stage, right, of the funnel, like, and essentially developing the whole thing, because it does take a lot of energy. And your media buyers want to have, they just don't have the know-how. You need to get somebody that specifically knows how to do it. So get a creative strategist, create a pool of 10 to 15 really good content creators that you really like, really fit the brand. They have really good energy, really good acting skills, and you are comfortable working with, and just work with them recurrently. And also, at some point, start building your entire like creative strategy team. So getting script writers on board, obviously also getting really good video editors, which, are really important. So for video editors, find somebody that is familiar with editing UGC, not somebody that is, editing YouTube videos and then you have to train them, because you also don't really know. You don't know what you don't know, right? So you want to start getting people that is already familiar with the space that can also learn, teach you stuff. That way you can like expand your knowledge about it and like, hire better talent, stuff like that. So you'll know what to look for. So get really good video editors, get a creative strategist, build your content creator pool, and just start, producing different creatives. Key tips would be to look at who's buying from you. So who's your audience? And then based on that, understand like what's their, what they talk about, obviously like the angles that you can create, but also understanding what type of like ad structure you should follow, right? So let's say that you have a product that requires a lot of social proof. Maybe you're selling supplements. They need a lot of like, they need to see a lot of people using it in order to, to purchase. That you might want to include more social proof, include more faces within your creatives, do a lot of more mashup style creatives versus maybe a product that, requires a lot of storytelling. In that case, you might want to have like, find a really good actor that he kills it with like, acting that can really speak good to the camera, and they can, build a story, you can create a script and they can go talk through it. Or just like, if you have a product that requires a lot of visual, they sells with the, if you sell the click with the visual, then you might want to just find actors that create really good aesthetic content. The footage is really, high quality, and you might want to put more emphasis on that. So looking at basically what's your solution, who's your target audience, who's buying that solution, and looking around, like looking at the competition, seeing what they do, and just building your own strategy slowly, testing things out, see what works, what doesn't work, and then go from there.
You talked about principles of direct response being the same through time, biases like human psychology, etc. What are some psychological things that you can tap into to get direct response from people through marketing?
My 3 favorite direct response principles are definitely intensification. Intensification basically means just intensifying your audience, the people that buys from you, like your audience desires, fears, to the point that is almost like a no-brainer getting your solution, right? To get rid of the problem they have, right? So there's a lot of ways you can intensify their fears, desires, right? One way is obviously like, social proof. So showing who is this solution works for, bringing in authority. So like, showing that this solution is approved by, an authority figure. So an example could be, you including a part, within the UGC, having a part where it says, that's why dermatologists recommended, my, doctor recommended this, right? So this is, subtle things like that make a big difference. Another thing could be like showing other alternatives. now, this is a principle, like, discrediting your polarizing your competition. So telling them why alternatives that they might be trying are not the best or are not that as effective as this. Then other things is like showing like explaining the benefits, showing a before and after, explaining how the solution is actually effective. So physically showing within the creative, maybe a before and after, right? That's why you need to have really good actors. I feel like a lot of the time brands like to stay away from showing before and afters because the actors are just not that good. But at the end of the day, this is dark response. You do want to like implement these principles. So even having an actor that shows like their, skin the way it was before, and then the juicy skin does make an impact, right? So these are some of the things that I would say.
So I found you through your LinkedIn content and where you write a lot of very insightful tips, etc. And I also see that you get really good engagement on a lot of the content that you're posting. What's your approach to creating content for LinkedIn and similar platforms?
So my approach starting out was purely like sharing publicly what we do for our clients. But I also think that a lot of people try to, because now I see there's more people that, try to take that approach in the sense of doing giveaways. Like, I share this for like an exchange of a comment. But the thing is that, if you just copy other people, like you're not going to go that far. And that's why I think my content gets traction, because I really do put a lot of creativity into it. And it's not like I'm just taking something that somebody has posted and I, change the words a bit and repost it. It's purely just like me thinking, okay, how can I create something innovative, but also knowing what my audience wants. My suggestion would be to, yes, focus on sharing value, but also understanding who's following you and like what they actually care about. You might think that, let's say you're a marketer like me, you sell like landing pages and creatives. You might think that, okay, people definitely want to learn more about, scaling ad accounts, right? Because it's still part of like what people talk about, but it might not be true, or even like, oh, people want to learn more about creative, but maybe your audience just wants, is more interested in landing pages. That's different, and, different type of posts. So see what works and then just repeat, do more of the same. I'd also would suggest to be smart with your content production. So make sure that you are cross-pollinated content across multiple platforms. So building one long piece of content and then breaking it down for maybe Twitter, LinkedIn, that way it saves a lot of time. And that's the thing, like the content that you post is free. So even if like don't be afraid of people, oh, they already seen this piece of content, because there's just so much content that they get hit on every day that they probably not gonna remember like something you posted like even 2 weeks ago, right? So don't be afraid of just like reposting something that you think is valuable. And yeah, that's my suggestion.
You have picked up quite a nice following, I think like 10,000 people or something like that. Are you getting business from it?
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point that you brought up. A lot of LinkedIn creators are great at getting eyeballs, right? Yes, like my post got 1,000 likes, crazy engagement. Okay, how many of those likes actually turn into business opportunities, partnerships, or like even customers, right? That's the thing. And for me, that's why I knew that right off the bat. It was not just all about LinkedIn likes, but also growing my newsletter, which is where you can really like get more personal. You can really start sharing more ideas, because most of the things that I share on LinkedIn, I don't share. My newsletter is kind of different. Like I'm way more like show my personality. I'm not sure if you're my newsletter, but it's like I'm a bit more. Yeah, I'm a bit more like share my thoughts, and I think that's what really builds a connection with your either potential clients, like if you're a brand owner, like investors, build relationships that you haven't really talked to the person, but just because they read your content, they feel like they're connected with you, right? So it's just like, it's really effective. So yeah, I will highly suggest to, post on social platforms, but then, find a way to drive that traffic within your own like list, that way you own it and like nobody can take it away from you. Because even LinkedIn, something happens to the algorithm, your account gets banned, it's over. I have some sort of like, security, because I know that my list is pretty big, it's growing. So if something happens to my LinkedIn account, I'm still, I guess, good to go. But yeah.
Something that I noticed that you do a lot as well is you are very like personal in the way you write, and it feels like I'm reading like regular email from you. It's not like this kind of super hypey branded. It's very like down to earth, which I appreciate. And I think it makes it stand out by not being too try hard.
That's the thing. A lot of people think, yes, like I'm gonna create a newsletter and I start talking shit, like just whatever, share my thoughts, right? And be personal. Do it, great, but give them a reason first to why they should listen to you, right? Don't just start talking, oh, I'm this person, like, okay, why the hell should I listen to you? So you first get them in with like actionable stuff, things that you actually, okay, I can actually listen to them. And then you just like slowly build that personal connection. But they first need to get into the ecosystem because you are actually solving a problem. They know, okay, this is the person that does creative strategy, Salif does creative strategy. I can learn dark response. And then actually, oh, this is actually his personality, right? So they know that, okay, I can get actionable insights and then also get to know him at a more like deeper level. And that's where really, I think, both combined really makes it like a good combination in terms of like building, sales opportunities, finding great partners, great talent, and yeah, growing your business pretty much.
Then you nail like the whole package.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, that was everything for today. I hope you learned a lot. I sure did. To learn more about these principles, frameworks, etc., make sure to follow his newsletter and his LinkedIn and Twitter. Also, follow my newsletter on thinkingmarketing.io, as well as me on social media channels. And that was it for today. Feel free to reach out if you want to discuss anything marketing related or if you want to discuss something else. Have a great day.